Welcome and thank you for joining us. We're going to be looking at InterBase, the ultimate embedded database today. And the one thing I can certainly say from personal experience is InterBase adds huge value to your applications as an ISV. Now, InterBase is an ultra-fast, scalable, award-winning, multi-platform embeddable SQL database. It comes with some great commercial-grade data security, disaster recovery, and a patent-pending change synchronization feature called Change Views. In this webinar today, we're going to be discovering how and why ISVs the world over choose InterBase to deliver cost-effective, market-leading software, and why InterBase really is the ultimate embeddable database. Now, about me, my name is Stephen Ball, and I am the product manager at Embarcadero for InterBase. And as I kind of alluded to, I've previously been an actual customer using InterBase a number of years ago as an ISV, delivering software to people like American Express and Hilton and Virgin. And I know firsthand the absolute huge value as a small ISV shop InterBase brought me in terms of reducing the amount of cost we had on support and increasing the time to market that we could bring features through on. So hopefully as we go through today, some of that will come through. If you have any questions or any ideas that you want to kind of get a sounding board on, if you're watching it live, then please use the GoToWebinar chat. Otherwise, feel free to drop me an email on stephen.ball@embarcadero.com. Now, I love the wide range of stories that I hear talking to our InterBase customers. And as we go through the webinar today, we will have a few of those stories interjected in because I think they help paint the picture about how and where people are using InterBase. But InterBase very much is already part of your life. It's used in pretty much every shopping mall across America. You can find it in the POS systems that are running a number of the major chains. When you visit your doctor, InterBase is quite often there. It's being used in ultrasound equipment, it's being used through eye exams and the systems that are managing your care there. It's being used in the back-end laboratories, managing and processing all the blood data. It's used as part of your safety, and there's a number of law enforcement agencies use InterBase to process and file police reports, and emergency response systems are using InterBase as well. And InterBase is even there when you go to unwind. It's used in hotels to manage spa appointments, for your weekend getaway, and to assist in managing your round of golf. InterBase is around a lot of different places. Now, solutions using InterBase can be as small as a credit card, and they can be accessed in ways like never before. We can communicate with computers, write on them, and communicate with them physically. And this means that we have to manage a whole wide range of IT solutions, a much greater range than we've ever had to deliver before. And one thing that many of these new form factors have in common is size. And size is something that InterBase has one major advantage on our competitors with. InterBase is one of the smallest footprint, fully featured DBMSs available, database management systems. It was designed originally for systems where the real estate was very, very small, both in terms of hard disk and memory. So the InterBase server runs in less than 40 megabytes and can be run in as little as 2 megabytes of RAM. So for ISVs, OEMs, delivering device-based solutions, that means you get more bang for your buck when it comes to the hardware because you haven't got to load it up just to manage the database engine. Many competitors' products that InterBase comes head-to-head with, often it's not unusual to see them requiring 10 to 20 times the amount of disk space and memory that InterBase requires. And also, those competing products will then be providing you a cut-down version. Now, with InterBase, you get a fully featured version, even on its smallest footprint. InterBase is perfect for independent software vendors, ISVs, who are building applications for sale to consumers or to industry verticals. It's also perfect for OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, who are manufacturing equipment requiring an onboard embedded database. And it's also great for value-added resellers who build applications for small and medium enterprises and then sell the database on as part of their offering. So I just want to cover what we actually mean by an embedded database. We've kind of given some examples of it there, but when you talk about an embedded database or an embeddable database, we're not talking about one that is less in terms of its features. We're just primarily talking about one that can be deployed as part of your product. Now that means we do have a great silent install option for InterBase, and you can integrate that straight into your installer, so sometimes people don't even know that it's actually there. And it also can be deployed inside your application, and we use this specifically on mobile platforms, iOS and Android, but can also be used on Windows and Mac, where we have client library drivers that go with your application, so you don't actually have to install the database engine on the machine. It just runs as part of your application itself. Now, InterBase covers a range of platforms. InterBase Server covers both Windows and Linux on 32 and 64-bit, covering Ubuntu, Red Hat Enterprise, and SUSE on the Linux side, and all the supported Windows platforms. The deeply embeddable library version can run out on Android and iOS, and also out onto Mac and Windows as well. We also have Solaris and Mac servers available on request. If you need those, then please contact our sales teams, and we can help you with getting those. So, as we've been talking about the different server and embedded editions, let's just quickly have a look at what that kind of means, just to kind of help make sense of the different kind of solutions that use the different editions of InterBase. So the InterBase server is very lightweight, yet let's say it scales to hundreds of users. I know customer stories from around the world where they're literally 500-600 concurrent users connected. If you've ever sent a letter through Brazil, then it's most likely gone through a system that's running InterBase. And the typical application that is running InterBase server will be providing enterprise features like data encryption at rest and over-the-wire encryption, and they're very important when it comes to data protection, as we'll see a little bit later on. But typically InterBase server applications are networked, multi-user, and are serving out to kind of either web-based products, catalogs, applications, or to ERP systems with their central located database, or to CRM applications. Now, the InterBase Server Edition is priced per user, or there's an unlimited user server which kind of kicks in around about 82 users. It works out about the right price. And that's very key for the OEM pricing, because having commercial grade features like encryption at rest or transparent data encryption is critical to being able to provide the right business solutions today. For example, to have the same features in SQL Server, you need to buy the Enterprise Edition, which is only priced per core, and would cost you, just for a server without a disaster recovery server, it's going to cost you about $57K. With InterBase, you're able to price just from a single user upwards. So that's a massive difference in pricing. Even an unlimited server license for InterBase at the time of recording this is around about just over $7K. So already you're saving over $50K, and the InterBase server includes the disaster recovery server license as well. So that makes the whole package over $100K cheaper than using SQL Server to have the data encryption at rest. So very scalable, both in terms of price and also performance, using features like journaling, which allow it to scale exceptionally well. with doing the PCC benchmark tests, InterBase kind of just scales and scales and scales. It may need some more memory when you're running a 32 warehouse setup compared to a single standalone machine, but InterBase server will cope with it. As I say, InterBase is designed to run on a very small footprint of both memory and hard disk space. Very, very easy to set up, just next, finish, and can be integrated into your installer. Hence why server edition of InterBase are most popular with our ISVs. Example of companies using InterBase server, people like Bsoft. One of these guys are from Bulgaria, and their software is being used by companies like PricewaterhouseCoopers and the Bulgarian military. Has been certified for use on their networks as well. And they're the leading provider of financial reporting to the tax authorities in the country. They are the market leader, and InterBase provides them and their team the right mix of ease of use, speed, high performance, security and scalability. And it's one of the reasons they have become number one, and they continue to support over 5,000 customers with an exceptionally small team. Management Plus is another company. These guys are dealing with electronic health records, storing patient data and business data, and they manage an awful lot of the eye care facilities within the US. They're using, as one of our 256-bit AES strength encryption for their data at rest, and to make sure their business data, any identifiable data that can be used to identify somebody, must be encrypted at rest according to data protection laws. And they use InterBase because it provides that, and they're now looking at expanding out onto mobile as well, and being able to use some of those core features around their existing database design onto tablets to be able to provide an optimal user interface for both their clinicians and their patients to provide better customer service. And their small development team has a reputation for delivering very fast to market new innovative IT ideas. And they're quoted as saying Delphi and InterBase have done a great job in helping us develop products that are affordable, stable and easy to maintain. So from business and medical through to leisure, relaxing down by the pool at the spa, having a massage, the chances are your booking has been run through an InterBase database. Palspring Miller, one of the leading providers of software, their SpaSoft application is used the world over, runs on multiple different platforms on Windows and Linux and Mac, and they chose InterBase and stick with InterBase because it provides near zero administration. It's ideal for embedding into hotel networks that are not always easy to get into, that you need something just to sit and run that's easily managed remotely. And InterBase provides them that very capability on very small footprint, which is ideal for using whatever PCs are running in the health clubs and the spas, or across the hotels, because they deal with everything from just one or two machine installations up to 70, 80 kind of seats. Now the other addition is InterBase to Go. And the main benefit of InterBase to Go is that it provides you the kind of commercial grade enterprise data protection that you'd normally expect in SQL Server Enterprise, for example, with data at rest encryption. It provides you that, but on mobile as well as on desktop. And InterBase to Go allows you to deploy the InterBase engine inside your application for that application to use. So it doesn't allow remote connections in, but what it does do is it allows you to have InterBase running on the device and having your data stored securely on that device. Beyond that, it can also act as a client driver to connect back to a remote InterBase server. So it allows you not only to store your local data, but also to connect across the network if you so need to. So I know one warehouse, for example, has been using InterBase to go on Android devices going around on forklift trucks, which are then connected through the local Wi-Fi network back to the InterBase server, allowing them to have live update of things from the shop floor, compared to having to go back to a terminal afterwards and update the paperwork that's been kind of ticked off as they've been going around the site. So InterBase to Go allows developers, a very, very fast version of InterBase because it runs in a process. You haven't got any additional communication layers between your application and a remote server, so it is very, very fast. Perfect for embedded applications. And again, volume discount is available as an ISV, OEM or VAR. The more licenses you need, the cheaper it gets. Now, one story I love around the InterBase to Go version, InterBase to Go and IB Lite use the same libraries, the developer libraries that you use to have a core engine inside your application. The only difference between IB Lite and InterBase to Go is basically the license file, which controls if you have some of the advanced features turned on. And SPINALI Design have been using InterBase on their mobile applications for their connected bikinis. So these are it's a very clever use of technology where, because the sun rays have different radiation every day, and depending if you've got cloud cover or not, they have a device that connects to the bikini or to the towel that measures UV radiation, and then is able to use Bluetooth to communicate that back to the application, which is written in Delphi on the mobile app. And then inside the application, they're then storing the data into InterBase, and are able to manage that data through the InterBase database, which is pretty cool. Now, the final option around the InterBase product editions is desktop. Now, desktop is Windows only. It basically is the same as the InterBase Server edition, apart from it's trimmed to only allow local database connections, and it doesn't have some of the advanced journaling capabilities. So it still has full encryption at rest, and the basic difference is if you need to have multiple applications talking to the same database on the single machine, use desktop. If you only have one application talking to the database, then you can use to go, and you don't need to then install anything onto the machine. InterBase Desktop is the same as the server install. It's just controlled by the license file, and gives you the ability then for having multiple connections in, because it is acting like a server but restricted to local connections only. So a really good example of where this is being used, GIVENHANSCO are one of the leading concrete batch control management software providers, and they have stuff working with GPSs in the vehicles and working them back with business accounting functions, and there's a whole lot of stuff running from the trucks, and they need something that is obviously low maintenance, because these trucks could be anywhere, but fully featured, and that's what InterBase is able to offer to them. And I know from talking to one of the sales reps who deals with the account that they quite regularly have the machines in the trucks being replaced. That's how much of a pounding the computers are under. So with that kind of scenario, having something that is zero maintenance, that's very resilient in getting just back up and running, is why InterBase is continuing to be their number one choice for their database solution. And another great story for InterBase embedded in is with ELECTROLUX. Now, ELECTROLUX are one of the world leaders in appliances. They've sold over 40 million units across 150 markets, and their Certis management information systems, which are used in their high-end devices, washing machines, tumble dryers, that their engineers are connecting into and working on. These are taking vital performance statistics from their washers and being fed back out. And they trust InterBase there because it just does what it needs to do. It's zero admin. You can just deploy it. You don't need to have somebody connected up to the machine all the time. It just embeds and works. So just to review what we've spoken about so far, we've heard probably time and time again now, InterBase is a near zero admin database. It's very easy to manage, very fast, very reliable. We've touched on the different editions with the server and the desktop edition, and basically being very much the same apart from the local connections versus allowing remote connections. And then the InterBase to go and the IB Lite, which allows you to have the mobile and the deeply embedded version of InterBase that allows it to connect back to a remote server as well as providing local storage. We've also touched on a few stories where we've seen InterBases used across the world in a host of different industries, everything from accounting, CRM, POS, hotels, health, and medical. We've got military customers in there. There's emergency service customers that we've mentioned, and even as deeply embedded into washing machines. InterBase is absolutely everywhere. So I want to touch now on a couple of the different things that really are of great importance to a wide range of our customers, and that's to do with disaster recovery and data security. So let's start with the data security first off. So one thing we're very proud with InterBase is that you get data security across the product lifecycle. It's about making sure that your data isn't exposed at any point. It's about making sure that not only your customer's data is protected, but also as an ISV, OEM, or a VAR reseller, that you're protected in case your customer does things that are a little bit stupid. So InterBase has a pretty strong security story. We've got full 256-bit AES strength encryption built into the database. The encryption access is built on top of the well-established user security, which comes with role-based authentication. So it allows you to define specific roles within the organization. So you might have a junior accountant role, and then a senior accountant, account manager role. You then might have a HR role. You might have a salesperson's role. And then you can allocate those roles to different individuals depending on what their skills are and what they do within the organization. Or you can just ad hoc set user security based on a specific user. But by having this strong role-based authentication, it means it's very flexible and easy to set up and test the encryption, and then provide only access to the people who should be able to read and see specific parts of the data depending on their job roles, as defined by the data security officer in the company. Now, the great thing having the encryption built into the database is that the configuration of who can see that being in the database means that developers can work on the data without necessarily having access to the full set of data. Now, for example, if you're using SQLite for a mobile application, then the data is either encrypted or it's not, and the developer will get to see absolutely everything. So if you're developing an internal HR application and you've got some of the salary details on there for the HR staff who are traveling around talking to your different staff in your distributed model, all of a sudden, if you have a problem, your developers can see the entire salary data for the entire company. That wouldn't make me feel very comfortable. But if you're using InterBase, then you can actually define that the developer role has quite high privileges maybe to the database, but certain areas are protected and will only give a default value back. So having granular column encryption is very, very powerful. And in addition, when it comes to different standards around the world, like PCI compliance and HIPAA standards and that kind of side of things. If you've got specific encryptable data that needs to be stored encrypted, it may be part of the standard that that the encryption key used for that data mustn't be used for other types of data. So you need multiple different encryption keys within the same database. Well, one solution would be have multiple databases, but you don't need to do that with InterBase. You can have one database to work with, backup, restore, and manage. And that's because you can have multiple encryption keys working inside the database at different encryption levels, and including within that is a backup encryption key to allow you to back up the database to an encrypted format, which you then have to have the backup key to restore back, to then be able to restore that back into a working copy. But at each step along the way, the data is still encrypted. So it's a very, very strong story from that point, allowing you to back up the database even onto an external disk through a batch file without exposing the access to the core data. So why is this important? Well, I want to touch on a couple of case studies. This one here is from the NHS in the UK. They had about 1,570 hard drives containing patient data. They hadn't had any previous issues, but the data on the disks was not encrypted. Now, they had written confirmation from a company that they were going to destroy these drives. So they've kind of done what they should be doing to a point. Unfortunately, the drives were taken out, the machines were recycled and sent off to Africa. Fine, really good stuff. But the physical drives were then wiped rather than being physically destroyed, and then ended up on eBay and were purchased by somebody. They discovered there was data that had been wiped on them using specialist recovery software. End of it was a pretty hefty fine from the ICO. They offered near the maximum fine they could offer at the time. Another one with Medicaid. They had a $1.7 million federal fine for the loss of an unencrypted USB drive. That's a pretty hefty fine for losing data. You could just imagine it, going down to a customer site, picking up some data, taking the taxi back to the office. You're going to do some work on that data for the customer, and you leave your keys in the back of the taxi. And you now have to tell the customer that, hey, sorry about this, but that's a $1.7 million fine because the data that went onto that disk wasn't encrypted. Well, the great thing, because InterBase offers the encryption in the database, you can set it up as the database file is created. That data is encrypted wherever it goes, wherever that database file goes. So you would never need to face that kind of fine. One of my favourite ones, and you kind of feel sorry for these guys, really. They had a whole load of hard drives, 57 of them. They weren't even connected to a computer, so it wasn't even like somebody electronically broke through their firewall and connected to a machine and started downloading data. They were physically in a data storage closet. And they got broken into, the hard drives were stolen, and because there was data on those hard drives that wasn't encrypted, they ended up with a $1.5 million fine. Now, this was back in 2009. Fines are getting more severe year after year. But this is pretty hefty money for not doing a really simple thing, making sure your data is encrypted at rest. Now, having data encrypted at rest is just one part of where you can help protect yourselves. And that's why if you look at, for example, SQL Server, their Enterprise Edition offers transparent database encryption. But you need to have the Enterprise Edition. InterBase comes with 8 cores, and a SQL Server with 8 cores. In today's money, is probably going to be just over $50,000 more expensive than the InterBase version. And then when you want to have disaster recovery and a second hot backup machine, ready to flip over to if you need it. It then becomes, the InterBase solution is over $100,000 cheaper for a 2-server setup in that kind of scenario, using 8 cores. So, InterBase is exceptionally good value for money with high-end commercial enterprise features built into it around data protection. But it's not just the cost of licenses or federal fines. Typically a customer who loses their data will lose 3 to 4% of their customer base in churn. You're going to have customer hotlines that need to be manned. There's going to be regulatory, obviously regulatory action and what the customers are going through. You're going to have to discount future products and services just to keep the rest of your customers. You'll probably be forced to put credit monitoring subscriptions in place for your customers to make sure that data that's been stolen isn't being used somewhere in a malicious way against them. Plus there's all the in-house communications and staff time and everything that goes along with that. So making sure your data is encrypted is a very key thing now. As we say, InterBase protects you throughout the development lifecycle. If it's on-site, off-site, on-device, over the wire, it's just there to make sure that you lower the risk around data breaches. And one thing that we really do find with ISVs is that taking these pre-built functionality and applying it into your application provides you with a great story of why you're better than your competitors around data security and keeping your customers' data safe, and that you're there to care for them. And that's great for relationship building, and it's great from a monetary point because that's kind of the high-end modules that you can really charge good money for, and quite often more than the actual physical InterBase licenses will cost. So one of the other key areas really is around disaster recovery. And disaster recovery is something that becomes kind of critical, especially when you kind of start looking at speed and performance around applications. InterBase has a number of high-grade disaster recovery features built into it. The first one is journaling, and journaling is used heavily through medical, through our medical installations. It allows you to have the speed and performance of having your application at the data layer that is running in memory, but with the security that as the changes to data are presented to the server, they're immediately written to disk. So journaling is a form of write-ahead logging. So as the changes come in, they're put into the log, they're then processed in memory, and at regular checkpoints they're then flushed to disk. But if there's ever a server outage between that data coming in being worked in memory, because that's the fastest way to put a lot of throughput through, if it's not flushed to disk yet and the server goes down, then the write-ahead log replays those changes as the server comes back up, making sure that none of that data is ever lost. So journaling is an exceptionally fast and capable feature within InterBase. Beyond that, we also have point-in-time recovery, and this allows you to basically restore back to a previous point in time. Now, I had one time I was actually managing a support desk for an ISV company, and the managing director, who used to kind of help out on out-of-hours support in the earlier days when the company was smaller, decided he was going to come in and help out for the afternoon, and we had a couple of people off sick. Now that's great and a lovely thing to do, but he accidentally ran a script that removed the entire contents of a table rather than just emptying a specific field on the table where there was photos being stored, and tried to remove them for people who hadn't been in for a while. Now the problem with that is that the company was due to be doing a BAX run, a membership collection that evening. Let's just say I wish I'd had point-in-time recovery at that point. Luckily we're able to go back to a backup of the database from the night before, but that still left 8 hours data processing that had been done that day that had to be redone before they could successfully go and collect that money. Which meant having to call a whole load of people in and get them to run through things. There was a few customers they knew they'd spoken to and they'd updated the system directly without having a physical paper record of the changes. So they had to kind of make contact with those people. They had to send letters out to everybody in the club in case there was anybody who'd been billed the wrong amount because of a change that had been put through that hadn't then been in place at the point they'd done the run. So it produced a heavy load of work that could easily have been avoided. And point-in-time recovery, even though the backup was the night before, using the point-in-time recovery part of the journaling mechanism, we would have been able to restore the database back to a second before that mistake had been made. So point-in-time recovery is a very, very powerful disaster recovery capability. InterBase also has some great ability to produce a data dump. Now the data dump is basically a read-only copy of the database, and that can be sat regularly updated. It can be updated incrementally, so it can be sat on a secondary machine, ready in case there's ever any major issue with the first machine. Or if you license the second machine, you can then use it for data mining and some of the really processor intensive functions like reporting. So you can spread the load, which helps increase the scale of your main production server and so on. So incremental dumps and data dumps are a very, very powerful feature. InterBase also has shadows. Now a shadow allows you to have two physical hard drives running the same database across them. So if there's a physical hardware failure on one of those drives, then the second disk will continue to work. Bit kind of like a RAID configuration in some respect. But you can also set up that the shadow will go and spawn an additional shadow somewhere else if there's a failure. So shadows are a very, very powerful feature of InterBase as well. So when it comes to backing up your data, what is the worst that can happen? Now, making sure you back up your data is a very important thing, and some of this is just stuff that goes beyond really just InterBase. It's very important about anything that you do with business, whichever database you choose. So definitely do adhere. I'll think about some of these things, but 6% of companies that lose their data will shut down within 6 months of the disaster. 31% of PC users have lost all of their files due to events beyond their control. Companies that lose their data center for 10 days or more due to a disaster, 50% file for bankruptcy immediately. 93% of those companies will have filed for bankruptcy within 1 year of that disaster. So making sure you've got access to your data and that your data is properly backed up and available is very, very important. And if you're doing tape backups, 34% of the companies fail to test their tape backups, and of those that do, 77% of those found that the tape backups have had failures. Now, 6% of all PCs will suffer an episode of data loss in any given year. Now, features like journaling and journal archives, being able to have those onto multiple machines, having the mirrors onto separate drives, all of these things help protect against the worst that can happen. So in terms of level of disaster recovery, no disaster recovery is going to take you days, if not months, to get back to where you need to be. You're probably going to be filing for bankruptcy if you have no data recovery. A standard backup or an incremental data dump is increasing what you have got to do, or reducing how much you've got to do to kind of get back and get live. But the ultimate part of it really is the point-in-time recovery. Being able to say, I want to go back to this second in time, using the journaling as well. The journaling and the point-in-time recovery really do mean that you get the best of performance and speed, as well as the ability to get back to the data that you need to. And again, on the top there, you probably put mirroring in as well. That really does help make sure that you don't even end up at the point that you haven't got a backup of the database. So we touched on some of the disaster recovery elements. We've touched on the encryption and the security side. The last thing that I want to finish off on really is to do with change views, and this is something that we're very proud of as part of within the InterBase team. It's a patent pending technology, which is quite a long way down. It takes a few years to get patents on software, and we've got quite a long way through that now. It was released back in December 2014, and since then it's become an award-winning technology. It's got some incredible stories. Definitely have a look at the Change Views white paper, which we'll provide a link to at the end of this webinar. But Change Views really helps scale out the change tracking technology capabilities from whatever existed before. We have cases where InterBase is being sat alongside a SQL Server to be able to read the SQL Server database and update its local copy, and then manage the changes going out to hundreds of distributed locations. So InterBase and Change Views is a very, very powerful technology in isolation, but also when you start looking at IoT, the Internet of Things, and how different things are connecting in, having to keep lots of different destinations updated without data moving back and forth and circular, where servers are not necessarily fixed locations. You may be talking about a mobile device becoming in essence a mini data repository, about briefcasing data out onto the real world. Change Views makes a huge difference, and we're going to explore a little bit about that now. So what is Change Views? Well, Change Views is a unique subscription-based model to subscribe to data and identify what data has changed in the database. So you create a subscription that covers specific tables and columns, and you then allow a user to have the rights to subscribe to changes to that data. So from a security point, it's very clean as well. There's no log tables. It just it tracks internally using our patented method what data is changing for specific subscribers. And because there's no log records, there's no log that everybody needs to have access to write to, read from. It's not something you can scan maliciously to try and find out, well, what's changed. What patient records have had changes around the HIV status field. You can't do that. Only the people who have subscribed to the changes can actually see the changes for them. Now, subscriptions can run both during a connection or spanning connection and time. So during a connection, you can get an InterBase event alert and then fetch just the delta for the changes to that table. So if you fetched 1 million records and you get a message say, hey, there's been a change to this table, you can then use the change view just to find out the delta of what's changed on the table rather than having to refresh the whole query again. So in terms of network speed and network data movement, very, very powerful. Spanning connections and time, well, you don't need to be connected for it to be recording what's changing. And this is the big thing when it comes to mobilization or having kind of disconnected networks, is that the data that you briefcase stays live and current. If you've downloaded 1 million records onto your mobile device for all your customer and stock history, not only is it protected because it's an encrypted database, not only is that encryption allowing only the right people to see what they need to see when they connect into the application running on that device, but the data that you downloaded isn't out of date. If there's changes centrally, when you connect back up later on, you're able to just pick up the delta and then bring that down and update the delta, update the data with the delta, rather than having to kind of log and track everything. Now, every subscriber can have multiple devices, so you could run a single user connected to the database and then everybody has a unique device ID for their subscription ID, or you could have every subscriber naming their own subscriptions, so you could have one for their phone, for their tablet, for their laptop, or whatever. It's very flexible, but it's a two-part pair. The InterBase user plus a string value that defines the subscription ID. So let me kind of paint that in a picture. Here's kind of a traditional approach of data. You make some changes to the data, you then got to fetch that data down again. And as time goes on, more changes are made. You're potentially looking here at kind of 23 data changes. With change views though, you only need to move the delta. So you're now down to just 9 changes that need to be moved in the same time period. There's some incredibly cool integration that's already been done with change views by different development languages. With Delphi and C++, the FIREDAC components have got an awesome merge dataset function now that's been written. Very simple to recreate in other languages that don't have it already. But literally it runs the same SQL command against the local database and the remote one to fetch the local data and then the remote one. And then you can just apply the changes from the remote data set because it tells you what fields at field level have been inserted, updated, deleted, and then you can then apply those into the local data set to bring those together. So before we just finish off, I promised some resources. Definitely go to the Embarcadero website, and if you go onto the products InterBase, you'll find the InterBase page here. The resources item here has a whole set of videos describing, to others maybe what the embedded database is, addressing data mobilization, IoT challenges. There's some great videos here on change views, seeing change views in action and taking you through programmatically how to work with those. If you need any help moving from Oracle or SQL Server into InterBase, there's a video here that helps describe how you can do that. And there's also a great InterBase Labs video tutorial series that will take you through learning how to do the basics of InterBase. Some nice short videos. The Change Views white paper will help explain that technology further to you with some great case stories and bits within there as well. There's mobilizing enterprise data, so if you are looking to take data over to mobile, this will take you through the top 5 mistakes and how to avoid those. And also we have the core InterBase documentation and links to the doc wiki and the community sites on the bottom of the resources page. So definitely the place to go if you want to carry on the conversation. So InterBase, we've had a look through today, we've seen how InterBase, and we've discussed how InterBase is a highly scalable, powerful embeddable database that is ideal for ISVs, OEMs and VARs. It has a very small memory and on-disk footprint, very simple to install. How the encryption adds huge value into your product offering, and how the security story of InterBase is something you can really leverage in your own products to provide great power and capabilities to your customers at an exceptionally low cost of entry. We've discussed the disaster recovery capabilities of InterBase as well. Certainly a lot to go and read up on then on that area, but the great thing is getting going with InterBase is very quick and easy. We mentioned some of the stories where InterBase is being used because of its ACIDS compliance architecture, because it's multi-versional architecture, because of the powerful change views technologies. InterBase is used in a whole host of different types of scenario. We've spoken about Bonev with their software being used for by people like PricewaterhouseCoopers and the Bulgarian military, right the way down to Electrolux, who've got it embedded into washing machines. So it really is used all over the world for everything from deeply embeddable up to quite decent sized enterprise applications. There's a whole host of stuff that we haven't had time to cover in this webinar, things like database monitoring. Again, if you go and have a look at the resources page, there'll be links back out to that kind of content there as well. And the great thing is, obviously, InterBase works not only tightly with the Embarcadero development tools like Delphi, C++ Builder and RAD Studio, but some of our biggest customers using InterBase are using Visual Studio and Eclipse and Xcode as well. So it really does become an available option to you no matter what you're developing in for your applications. So really now it is over to questions and answers.